I would like to draw your attention to two stories, and I got this via the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, which is a group on Facebook. Um, the first story concerns, first report I should say, concerns, this is via the mayors against illegal guns. It says Michigan mayors against illegal guns, police, domestic violence opponents block NRA attempt to eliminate background checks for handguns bought from unlicensed sellers. I'll read that again. Michigan mayors against illegal guns, police, and domestic violence opponents block the NRA attempt to eliminate background checks for handguns bought from unlicensed sellers. Now, I don't have time in the video to read everything in the report. It's quite a long report, but I will put a link. The bit that catches me here is NRA attempt to eliminate background checks for handguns bought from unlicensed sellers. This is proof that the NRA is a dangerous organisation, an irresponsible organisation. And you know what's ironic about this? Recent polls have found that a majority of NRA members, that's grassroots members, actually do support background checks. And there's further evidence that the leadership of the NRA, I believe, is a gulf between the leadership, the people running this dangerous organisation, and those people who support it. And once again, I would call on those who support it to have a look exactly at what they're supporting. Because, in my opinion, responsible gun owners would have no problem with background checks, because you would have nothing to hide. If you're a responsible gun owner, why would you fear a background check? Makes no sense to me. The only people who would fear a background check are those who are planning to use the gun for violent purposes, or who have a criminal history, etc. This shows how extreme the NRA is, and I'll give you a link to that story. The other story reads, Houston, Philadelphia kids accidentally shoot themselves at home. A 4-year-old boy in Houston accidentally shot himself in the head, and a 5-year-old girl in Philadelphia shot herself in the foot after both children got hold of their parents' guns Tuesday night while playing at home. The unidentified 4-year-old boy climbed onto a tall furniture chest and found a hidden handgun around 11:40 p.m. Tuesday, according to the Houston Police Department. The gun accidentally discharged when the child was turning it towards himself, hitting him in the head. And again, there's a long report with that. I'll put the link. Just in case you think I'm making that up or whatever, I will put the link. Oh, here we go. In Philadelphia, the 5-year-old girl is recovering after she shot herself in the foot with her father's gun around 11 p.m. Tuesday. Police said the girl's father works in security. His gun was in a holster when the girl found it and pulled the trigger. No charges have been filed in either case. Now, firstly, I don't want to come across as cold or heartless. I'm sure the parents in both cases are devastated and they wouldn't have wanted that to happen. But this still indicates that some people are irresponsible. I'm sorry, but that is irresponsible, leaving a gun where a child can easily get it. I'm not saying it's malicious, and it must be terrible what the parents are going through, but this is a good example of how reckless guns can be. That is not responsibility to me. If I was a gun owner, and I had children, I would make sure that gun was out of reach of those children. Period. I would put it on the top of a cupboard or something. So these parents have not been malicious, but in my opinion, they've been reckless. And there's many other examples of this. And it isn't just children finding guns. Gun owners themselves have often been subject to accidents. Now, you could argue it's their fault, their responsibility, they're suffering from it. But, there's also the potential for other people to suffer from accidents. So when we're talking about the issue of gun violence in America, it isn't just from murders and maniacs shooting up... sorry, I'll fix that. It isn't just from maniacs shooting up movie malls and so on. It's from accidents. It's from a whole range of factors, and it's just yet more evidence that something needs to be done in America about the gun issue. Now, why the hell would the NRA oppose background checks? Why? You have to question that. To me, that's an extremist position. They're always branding their opponents extremists, but they will not even support background checks. What sort of organisation opposes background checks for unlicensed dealers? That's insanity to me. And I know there's many gun owners who would agree with me on that. They might disagree with me on gun control, but I think they would agree on that. I.e., if you're a responsible gun owner, what have you got to hide? It's utterly nuts. And this is the leadership of the NRA. This is what this organisation is advocating. What they're ultimately saying is anyone can have a gun. Anyone. That is effectively what the argument comes down to. So in theory, under the NRA's logic, a felon who's just come out of prison for, say, he served 20 years, has a history of violence, is a schizophrenic, under the NRA argument, he could then quite happily go in, and let's say he has a score to settle, he could quite happily go into the nearest gun store and buy a weapon. Under the NRA logic, that's perfectly okay. This organisation, I really do believe it's a quasi-terrorist organisation that is actively promoting gun violence in America. Now, I'm not saying the members of the organisation are terrorists, I'm not saying that for a second. And I'm sure many of them are reasonable people who are responsible. I'm well aware there are many people who support the NRA, but I do urge that they do a bit more research on what exactly they're supporting. Because the leadership of the NRA are a bunch of liars. And I think the fact that they won't even support basic background checks demonstrates their sort of thinking, their extreme position. Yeah. I won't add too much more to this video. I'll put the links, and I will say, CNN has just done a special program with Piers Morgan dedicated entirely to gun violence. Now, gun advocates will not like that. They'll say, oh, it's we're spending too much time on this subject. They'll want America to gloss over the issue, but this is a very real problem. I mean, in the last 24 hours, we've had the Portland shooting. And the shooter in that case, he listed his likes as shooting. I wouldn't be surprised, I don't know the full details of the case, so I won't comment in detail about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he bought his weapon legally. 3 dead, including him, 6 more injured. This seems like an everyday story in America these days. I guarantee you within the next 24 hours there'll be something similar. And then in the next 48 hours. I've honestly lost count of the number of spree shooting incidents this year in America. And I just think it's tragic. And like I've said in the other videos, I can never comprehend the mentality of gun lobby. And by the way, the analogies about, cars kill people, it's just ridiculous. The primary purpose of cars is for transport. Yes, people die in motor accidents. True. Maybe more than the number of people who die from shootings. In fact, I know it's more. But that's not the point, because you need cars for transport. Guns, on the other hand, are not necessary in most circumstances. They're really not. Millions of people around the world don't own a gun and feel perfectly safe. So if you're arguing that you do need a gun, then I would say, well, America must be a deeply paranoid society. An extremely dangerous society if you're arguing that you need a gun for protection. And when you get people in the wake of the Aurora massacre arguing, I think it was in Chicago, a man said he had a right to bring a gun into a movie theater for protection. That's the impact it's having on society. I'll just quote one more thing if I can find it. I found this was interesting. This is actually from a Fox News sports commentator, which is interesting because Fox News wouldn't usually be on the sort of side of common sense, but in this case I would 100% agree with this. This is a quote from Fox Sports columnist Jason Whitlock. We've come to accept our insanity. We prefer to avoid seriously reflecting upon the absurdity of the prevailing notion that the Second Amendment somehow enhances our liberty rather than threatens it. In other words, this obsession with the Second Amendment is causing a lot more harm in America than positivity. And I'll leave it at that. I give Piers Morgan and CNN credit for raising the issue, and maybe one day the US will start to wake up. I do believe more people are becoming outspoken. The NRA is losing battles, and that's great news. Some politicians are starting to stand up to the NRA. Again, great news. Because in my opinion, this is a bullying, thuggish organisation. And all decent American citizens can't let them win. Who owns American liberty? Is it the American people or the NRA? Ask yourself that. I'll leave it there.